We're recording. Great. Okay, let me go to the magical PowerPoint. Right. Can you not, for those of you that got your cameras on, can you nod at me that you can see my screen? Excellent. Right. We're in business. So today, what we're going to be talking about. This session is all about how you understand the beautiful and wonderful thing that is you, and how you start to find the strength in your own personal values and your skill sets, and how you can then translate that into employability. So for those of you that may not have been in the first session, my name is Rachel Stockey. I am a coach. I have a specialism in coaching women around confidence and imposter syndrome, but I cover a whole range of different topics with my clients, from life, career, and business coaching. So that's one hat that I wear. The second hat is I also work at King's. I work in the Entrepreneurship Institute as the head of entrepreneurial skills, running a whole range of different training to help people think more like an entrepreneur. And we're going to touch a little bit on that today. It's going to come into what we're going to talk about. And my third hat is I'm also co-chair of the Gender Equality Network at King's, Elevate. So if you've seen any of our events around, that's also me. But I think the things that we're covering today kind of touch on all of these different areas. So it's useful to kind of know where I'm coming from. So what are we going to be talking about today? So what we're going to be covering is how you can understand and utilize your unique personal values, how to create yourself a personal mission statement and vision statement that will help guide you towards the opportunities and things that you might want to go towards in future. And how do these things translate into employability? So if we're talking about CVs, LinkedIn, interviews, how do we use this information about our values and our strengths and our vision to translate into increasing our employability? So we're going to go on a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Like I mentioned, if at any point you've got questions, pop them in the chat. I should be able to see that as we go through. And yeah, we're going to jump straight in. Hold on, let me just make sure I've got. It's not allowing me to see the chat at the same time, so I'm just going to make sure I've got that. Here we go. Excellent. Right. Okay, so I would love for everybody to start off with to tell me two things. One, what do you think I mean when I say personal values? And secondly, what attracted you about today's workshop? Is there something in particular that you were looking to get out of today, or something that intrigued you, or something that you've been struggling with? So it'd be really great for me to get a sense in the room of your understanding of what I mean by personal values and what you are particularly personally hoping to get out of today's session. And hopefully it will kick us off towards it. Or you can also put your hand up if you'd like to just talk as well. We can do that.
I'm certainly hoping to get some idea of how I can translate the things that I've done and am into kind of sellable material. You know, like it's one thing to know what you've done, but it's another to know what it means on paper to other people.
Yes, definitely. Okay, I think I saw another hand up. Bezawit.
Yeah, maybe by personal values, those would like include things like work ethic, your attitude at work, motivation, and things like that. And for the second part of the question, what I'm looking to get out of this is like the ability to market myself better, you know, to make sure that, you know, like I have the kind of skills and accomplishments that I feel are needed for different workplaces, but I don't know how to make it come across as valuable to employers. So I want to work on that.
Okay. Awesome. Any other thoughts, things that people want to
I would be excited to find out how to be more strategic in the job application process, perhaps based on exactly your personal profile and what you feel really motivates you to do a job that you find valuable. Because in the current job market, opportunities are so scarce that you find yourself looking at a lot of opportunities that don't really seem very relevant, that you don't actually want to do, but you just hope and pray that they can be a bridge to what you do want to do at some stage. But yeah, that's an annoying interface.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that, and we are definitely gonna touch on that.
I am sorry I'm late. I was trying to connect. I have some issues.
No problem, Julia. Yeah, and being strategic in that, and I think the current circumstances aside, we do have control over what we decide to apply for and what we decide to give our energy to. So it's worth thinking about how we're doing that in a way that's going to serve us longer term. Obviously, we have some immediate needs around, being able to pay rent and get some food to eat and those sorts of things. But actually, ultimately, it needs to feed our longer term goals and our longer term vision of what we want to do. So we need to make sure that we're balancing those things. Melina put in the chat, I'm struggling to see what I can bring to the table when applying for jobs, since I always question if I even have strengths and qualities that are sought after in the application process. Okay, interesting. So we can definitely link back to what we were talking about around imposter syndrome when it comes to that, because we know evidence is there that you are not alone as a woman in underestimating the value that you can bring to an organization and underestimating the amount of experience that you have in relation to roles. So I think it's an interesting kind of transition that we're going from imposter syndrome as our first session into this, because we need to bring with it an understanding that everyone has unique value. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more as we kick off today. Valentina says, personal value is our unique set of skills and personality. I am drawn to it because I'm not sure I know mine or how to use it. Great segue. This is exactly where we're going to kick off. So let me go back to here. So thank you for contributing, everybody. Before we jump into finding out what your personal values are, I just wanted to share with you why it's important and why I spend a lot of time with the majority of my coaching clients. This is usually the first session I will do one-to-one with them, because it gives such a great foundation to build on for pretty much everything else. So first of all, knowing what your personal values are, what drives and motivates you, what's unique about you, the things that you care about and what drives you, it increases our level of self-awareness, because we can then understand, okay, this is why this is resonating with me, or why not, because you've got the words that you can use to put to those feelings. It's one of those things that if you look at kind of neuroscience, our different parts of our brain control different things. The part of the brain that controls why and how what we do and our motivation is not the same part of the brain that controls language. So it's useful to go through exercises like this where you can put the language in motion and know what it is that's driving you. So it's really useful in kind of building your own self-awareness. It then can act as a compass for decision making, because if you know what your values are, what is driving you, what motivates you, what you're kind of steering towards, then when you've come to make a decision, you will know, okay, if I make this decision, it's going to lead me further away from my personal values or bring me further towards those. And it acts as a kind of helpful guide when you're making decisions that feel really sticky. The next, it enables us to avoid suboptimal work environments. If we know what our values are, we also inherently know what they're not. And it means that we are much better at being able to understand when we're going into different working environments, why, those gut feelings that you get of like something just doesn't feel right. It's that language again. You will be able to understand why it is that it doesn't feel right for you, and what it is that's not sitting quite right with the way that you want to work and the environments that you want to be in. And it also allows us to then better articulate the value that we bring into those scenarios. So when we think about employability and CVs and LinkedIn and all of that stuff, we then have a valuable knowledge and vocabulary base to be able to start expressing what we can bring as an individual into their organization. So we're going to do straight off the bat, we're going to get straight into an exercise. It would be really great if everybody had a way to take notes, whether that's pen and paper or on your phone, because the next thing I'm going to do is click this button and there's going to be a lot of words that are going to appear on the slide. So what's going to happen is I am going to start a timer on my phone, And when I do that, I'm going to click the button and a lot of different values are going to appear on my screen. And from that, I'm going to give you 3 minutes exactly to choose from the list that comes up 7 of the words that particularly resonate with you. This is not by any means an exhaustive list. It's a jumping off point. So if there's words that kind of spring to mind for you that aren't on the list, by all means include them. But what you will generally find is all of the words are positive. So this is going to feel like a little bit of a struggle, and it's meant to, because it's meant to get you to really think about what is really important to me, what comes above all else, because we have to be able to prioritize these things, because it will really drill down to our core. What's true for us that might not be true for somebody else? Why would I pick something above somebody else? So we're going to explore this a little bit. So you've got 3 minutes on the clock to write down your 7 of the words that particularly resonate with you. My one tip on this is the first time you do it, go with your gut, whatever that means for you. It's not, the reason I put a timer on it is because I don't want you to agonize over it. I want you to make quite snappy decisions. Okay, everybody ready? Okay, here we go. Half your time is gone. I feel like I should play the countdown music in the background. Thirty seconds left. Okay, time up. Okay, how did you get on? Give me a nod or a thumbs up if you managed to get your 7. Okay, how was that? Was it easy, difficult, challenging?
I found that quite difficult actually, because I was hovering over some of them and thinking, yeah, that's me. And then I was thinking, actually, that's what I wish was me. So it was like quite hard to distinguish between what was resonating and what I was hoping I would get to someday, I guess.
That's a good observation though, because it's aspirational values are an interesting thing, which suggests to me that it's something that's important to you, but is not currently true in the way that you're living your life right now. And that doesn't mean that it's not a value. It means that part of your life is out of whack with your personal values. And so I think it's something that we need to think about, because it's part of that strategic decision making going forward about how, if the values that we want to be true for us are not currently true, then that forms part of our decision making about what direction we go in future. Julia, how about you?
Yeah, I had some issues because all those values I think are valuable, are important matters, right? So I was trying to focus on what are kind of core for me, with or without a job.
Yeah.
And so I selected 7 that are core for me, out and out, in and out the job. And then I put another 7 that are important when I have to make a decision about jobs. So I actually picked 14. But if I had to pick only 7, I would probably keep the upper ones, because everything is important. It just sometimes it's very challenging, and this reminded me that many times I've done so many resumes in my life, and I used to try to sell myself in a way, right? But for example, like a year ago or so, I decided that I'm not going to put on my resume anymore that I can work under pressure, because then you end up, it's like you're asking for it, right? So, and it's going to come anyway. It's going to be pressure anyway. So I don't know.
You don't need to volunteer for it before you've even started.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Valentina said in the comments that you found it easy at first, and then some of them you had to really think about. I think the point that Julia made around having separate sets for kind of personal and professional life is something that sometimes I do as an exercise with coaching clients, because there is different aspects of you, right? And the things that are top priority in a work context might not be true for your personal life. But I would, in that scenario, if you can put yourself in different mindsets of, okay, personal life and professional life, if I was picking in that zone, if there's ones that overlap, they tend to be your kind of core values that are true for you no matter what aspect of your life you're in. And you'll probably find that they remain consistent for the longest period of time as well. The other thing about this is your values will evolve over time. Now that you've done this exercise, you are not stuck to those 7 values for the rest of your life. I myself do this process on an annual basis when I'm doing my kind of, what do I want to do this year, kind of reflection thinking around January time, to figure out what are the ones. I now have a better understanding of the ones that come up year in and year out. They're likely to stay with me for quite a long period of time, probably throughout my entire professional career, or that kind of time span, whereas others kind of come in a little bit more of a medium or short term timeline. Monica said, I found I wanted to add some to the list, which is an interesting point to make, because I'm just about to be quite mean. So your next task is to get rid of 2 and cut it down to 5 of the list of 7 that you have. And if you had to cut 2, which 2 would they be? People don't generally like me at this stage. You already made me pick 7 of a list of all the good things, and now you're telling me I'm only allowed 5. Okay. Julia's looking very uncomfortable.
Well, I just did the job, but yeah, I am.
Okay, Give me a nod if you've done it. You've cut your 2 out. You're down to 5.
Yeah.
Okay. The next thing I want you to do, because I'm not quite done being mean yet, is I would like you to order your 5 values that you're left with in priority order from 1 to 5. So 1 being the most important, down to 5 being the least important. How are you doing, Monica, from wanting to add some to your list to me making you cut it down again? Are you okay?
Sorry, ladies, menopause hits come and go.
Okay, Monica's she's still whittling it down. Okay, I have the faith you will get there. This process is meant to be a challenge. The bit that I would encourage you to do after today's session that takes a little bit of time is to then write your own short definition of what each of those values means to you. Because whilst there are dictionary definitions of each of these words, the reason that we choose them for our personal values is very personal to us. And you will have an understanding of what that word means to you that is good to put into words. So I would really encourage you to take kind of 10, 15 minutes and just write out what that value means to you so that you've got them kind of in a really concrete fashion in writing that you can refer back to, and it will help kind of with the kind of guiding piece. And it really is a grounding kind of tool as well, because you can then start to use them in a whole range of different ways. So I've got a couple of questions that I now want us to do some reflection on based on our values. And hopefully you'll be able to see the different applications that you can start to have when you understand what your values are. So the first one is, what was a time in your life when you felt the most unhappy at work? So this could be work, it could be studying, it could be school, but I'm thinking in your, whatever that means for you, professional capacity. So if you have a particular memory or a particular time in your life where you felt most unhappy or most unfulfilled or most discontent with your circumstances, it's not a pleasant place to go to for a lot of people, but I want you to think about that for a minute and then think, if you think about your list of values in light of that memory, what then starts to appear? Because what generally tends to start happening when you bring up times like this, for most people, if they have got a good understanding of their personal values, when they look back at times that really made them unhappy or unfulfilled or deeply uncomfortable, there was either a complete lack of their personal values in that scenario or a direct conflict with some of their values. So for someone that potentially, if we looked back at that list, had identified growth or challenge as a personal value for them in their workplace, they would feel deeply unhappy in a place that had zero opportunities for progression, for personal development, for being allowed to take on new responsibility. If they were stuck in a role and growth and challenge was important as a value for somebody, then there's a conflict there and you're going to get very frustrated in your workplace. And obviously there's more extreme versions of that. If somebody's personal value is centered around either like fairness or equality, and they're in a workplace where people are being discriminated against, you can imagine the kind of internal conflict that causes on a daily basis when we're in an environment that is in conflict with our values, or there is a complete just lack of them in that environment. So when I kind of put it to you like that, does that ring true for you when you think back at the times that you were thinking about sales? Like, yeah, does it make sense? Can you see the conflict or the lack going on? Okay.
Actually, it feels like a light bulb being switched on.
I'm glad it's useful, because then this is number one, and then the opposite can be true. So if we go to the next question, if there was a time in your professional life, whether that be work, studying, university, where you felt the most happy and the most fulfilled at work, and then we look back at the list of personal values, what then appears? Because again, in this scenario, what tends to happen is people realize actually their values were surrounding them in abundance at those times, and or there were other people around them that it felt like had a shared value set with you, that you were in the company of people that also valued similar things to you. Not always, but it can be true. But the environment that you were in allowed you to live in line with your values. Is that also ringing true for people in the things that are coming up? Okay. So those are obviously kind of polar opposites. We look at the most happy and we look at the most uncomfortable, the most unhappy that we are in those scenarios. And it kind of allows us to see, okay, how does my environment interact with my values? But then if we extend how we can start applying these values further, we can get into questions like this. What would a life that was lived in complete alignment with my personal values look like? So if we allow ourselves to start projecting a future, if you imagine yourself maybe 5 years' time, and you were able to say to yourself, the way that I am living my life right now is in complete alignment with my values, what does that life look like for you? Where are you working? Who are you working with? What projects are you working on? Where do you live? What are you spending your free time doing? Who do you spend a lot of time with? How do you feel? And we can start to build out this picture of an optimal life. And if we do that in a lot of detail, it enables us to, you don't have to be a massive fan of visualization, but it helps to kind of ground you in a future that is possible, because there are multiple interpretations of how we can live a life in line with our values. It doesn't mean that we have to live at this address in this place doing this specific job with this specific person. You'll likely have come up with things like, I want to be working for this kind of organization, working on a project that means something like this, around people that make me feel this way. But allows us to give enough clarity to it that it's no longer just a shot in the dark of where we could be in 5 years' time, because we know how we want to feel at that time, and then we can work backwards. Did anything in thinking about this question come up for anyone that surprised them, they hadn't even thought about before, something that kind of became clear that they hadn't really considered might be something in their future? Yeah, there's a bit.
Yeah, I think what became clear for me is like obviously we all have our own like aspirations, but why you want to like at the core do certain things became clear. Like I feel like it's really helpful to write these things, these specific values down so you could see what it is that draws you to certain parts of life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people talk about motivation as something that's quite external in a way. It's like, what's going to make me be motivated to go running in the morning? Or and being able to come down to the core value of like, why would you want to do that thing? And like, how do you stay motivated at work? How you stay motivated at work is doing the work that matters to you. If it doesn't matter or isn't in an environment that's conducive with your personal values, the motivation is just not going to be there because it's not the right environment in which you can thrive. So hopefully this makes sense, and I would encourage you to, as you notice times going forward where you either reach a state of flow, you know, that kind of I am in the zone kind of mentality, or the opposite of that where you feel completely run down, unhappy. If there's a way that you can trigger something's going on here, whether it's positive or negative, and ask yourself the question, how does this connect to my values? You will be able to start creating that sense of self-awareness of, okay, there's conflict going on here with this particular value, or everything is working right now and I'm in a really great place. And you can start to unpick it a little bit. And I would just encourage you to stay curious and to stay allow yourself to continue to interrogate those feelings, because this is not meant to be static. So if things get a bit muddy, you can always return to this exercise and repeat it, because you might have found something has fundamentally changed for you. We all change and we all grow as people. We have to allow ourselves to do that. So yeah, hopefully that this is useful, because then what happens with our kind of optimal future, we then can use our values like a compass. Because if we're starting to think about what jobs might I want to apply for, a lot of what we're going to be talking about later today, our kind of future career paths, and we're scanning Indeed or LinkedIn jobs or whatever that is for opportunities that we might be interested in, how do we do that? What Kristen was talking about in terms of strategic kind of approach to what opportunities should we be looking for, we can then read job descriptions with the lens of how well does this fit my personal values? Suddenly, when you read the purpose of a role and the responsibilities, and especially the companies that include the bit at the bottom which says what their company values are, you know, suddenly those things mean something. Usually like corporates, we go, oh yeah, they say that they're caring and they say that they're excellent and they say that they're this. But going through this exercise yourself, companies pay a lot of money to consultants to help them figure out what their values are, because it should drive everything that they do as a company. Why they exist should be really connected to that. So suddenly, when we're presented with a job pack, be that person description, whether that be role profile, whether that be the About Us page of the company itself, we can start picking it apart a little bit and saying, how well do I see my personal values appearing in the role and the opportunity that's put before me? And if you know that you've only got a certain amount of time and you know you can't apply for everything under the sun, it can serve as a shortlisting process for us of, okay, if I'm only going to pick 5 jobs to apply for, it's going to be the ones that feel most in line with my personal values. And I know, and I can now articulate why I'm finding that connection. And I can articulate why I'm going to not apply to some others, because even though there might be a connection in the job title or experience, actually there's something missing or there's something in conflict for me. And you can use this not just for job job hunting, it's like anything, you know, if you're going to decide, should I move to the Bahamas or not, you can do this kind of comparison of, is that taking me further towards or further away from my optimal life that I want to live fully in line with my values in the future? And it helps to give a more objective yet deeply personal way of assessing different opportunities. Does that make sense? Okay.
I have a question, Rachel.
Oh yeah, go for it.
On the back of that, I don't want to jump the gun, and it might be something you come to, I don't know, but I was just thinking, when I was thinking about that, what do you recommend anything you can do if your values are going to conflict and there's nothing you can do about it? So for me, like when I envisage the future, one of my values is family, but my husband's American and my family are British. So at some point I know I'm going to be separated from them. And that's even more the case if I pursue the career path that I'm interested in. So is there a way that you can kind of align yourself with that being the case and knowing that you're not going to have all of them where you want them?
Yeah, I think that's partly why we do the rank them exercise of actually, and I know especially for a lot of women, the top two of kind of family and career conflict that happens that are both equally important can be really sticky. So what I would say about kind of untangling that or thinking about different ways is, what's the best balance that you can find amongst those 5 values, so that not one of them has to completely disappear or be completely torn to shreds? Because even if one of our top 5 is completely missing, we're likely to feel more discontent than if they're all there to a certain degree. So whether that is a career compromise or a family compromise from your ideal scenario of all of those things, what's the best version that you can kind of move towards that would enable you to kind of top up the piggy bank of each one of those at any given time? And that, I would say, this is also why this swings over time, because there may be times in life where, okay, for 1 year it's massively leans towards family, and another year where you get given an opportunity where it swings back towards career. But over the span of, say, 10 years, all of those values have been fed a decent amount of opportunity and a decent amount of time and energy, that actually it's not about always creating a life where every single one of them is at max 100% of the time. So it's about, and hopefully, you know, in your communication with your husband about what's important to you, you know, sometimes it's useful to do this kind of exercise where you have, you know, you do values as a couple, like what matters to both of us and his individual ones, and say, what's different on your values list than mine? Like, that's an interesting conversation to get into. It's a bit couples therapy, so we won't go there, but like, it's useful to start understanding where there's tension within the relationship, or what people are expecting the other person to do. And it doesn't necessarily have to be husband and wife, it can be parents and children, and, you know, all these different dynamics. If there's a difference in expectations around values and what you're meant to prioritize, it often creates tension. So I would say, allow yourself to flex the amount of energy and time that you're giving to different values at different times, depending. That can just be opportunistic. If amazing opportunity comes forward, you have to be able to kind of respond to that, as well as what feels right for you in any given moment. But knowing that having the kind of list of the values there at the times at which you feel that there's a value that you really need to pay some attention to, i.e., I'm feeling really distant from my family right now, that needs to be moved up my priority list. You can adjust and tweak those dials as you move through. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, right, let's move on. So we're going to shift gears a little bit into vision statements. And I wonder, either put your hand up or whack it in the chat. What is your understanding of what a vision statement is? Yeah, Julia.
I think when you were talking a minute ago, saying where do you want to be, how you want to feel in 5 years from now, these questions are kind of would fit into that, right? So I know, for example, I would like to be in a place that I can blah blah. For me, my ideal is working 4 days out of 7. Or for example, no, that's a part of my vision. Thank you.
Anybody else? What do you think? Vision statement.
I would say something very similar. Like for me, it would be basically envisioning a scenario, right, where I'm not just allowed to have these values, but I'm given the opportunity to unfold them and kind of live them. And for me, a vision statement is thinking about a base of how I can express my values. So it has to do with how where I would envision myself to be in 5 or 10 years. But and kind of concretize how I would love to see my values expressed in my career, but also personal life.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so yeah, definitely both of those things. And I think the thing that really differentiates a vision statement for me is about how you feel. It's a very emotional thing. So as I was saying, companies pay consultants lots of money to help them figure out what their values are. They also pay them a lot of money to help them write their vision statements. So a vision statement, if you want a technical definition, there's many technical definitions. I particularly like this one. A vision statement is an inspirational statement of an idealistic emotional future of a company, a group, or an individual. It's the world that you wish you could live in, essentially. What do you want to be true? So it's about kind of projecting a version of yourself forward in time to be able to say, I wish I lived in a world that, and what would complete that statement for you? It's slightly different to a mission statement, which often gets confused. To me, a mission statement is about what is actually being done in order to create that future. So the vision is, what do we want the world to look like? And a mission statement is how we are playing a part in creating that world. Hopefully that makes sense. So when we come to think about this for ourselves, it links hugely with personal values, as you can probably tell, because that allows us to picture that world that we might want to go on to create for ourselves. And you can do this as a company as well. But for now, we're going to play a little game, because a good vision or mission, a good vision statement is recognizable. So we're going to do this one. I'm sure everybody knows. So we're going to play a guessing game. Write in the chat when you recognize the vision statement of who said this. Anton, straight in there. Yeah, Martin Luther King. Okay, so it's a good example of a personal vision statement. Wanted to live in a world where children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. It was a world that didn't exist for him yet, but he wanted to live in that world in the future. Usually vision statements, as I said, come in forms of companies. So let's see which of these vision statements you can guess who do they belong to. Some for Google, some for Wikipedia. Okay, it's Google. Yeah, Google has evolved in its vision and mission statements a little bit, but this is essentially its kind of core one. Okay, so Google's vision statement matches apparently what they do. So what about this one? Cratchy, got it. It's Tesla. So yeah, it makes sense when you kind of see it in retrospect. Okay, how about we're back to individuals. Exactly. Okay, John Lennon. This one's a little bit difficult. It's possible. I'm going to see if anyone can guess this. Who is this? No, not Maria Montessori. It is a woman, though. I'll give you that clue. No, not Nightingale. Okay. It's actually Oprah said this, which is interesting when you think you can kind of see where she was going with it. But interesting that if you can't guess it, what does that mean? Might not mean anything. It might mean a lot to her, but for the rest of us. What about this one? Not the UN. Anyone know? Not Apple. No.
Is it a company though?
It's actually King's. So King's College London's motto or tagline or vision statement is they exist to make the world a better place. Interesting that as a collective of people that associate themselves with King's in a number of different ways, we didn't know that. Does that mean that they're not doing, if we think about this as a vision statement, would we agree that King's lives up to this vision statement? Don't know. Some people probably would. So it's interesting when you kind of play through these of how we understand the role that these play, because they're an aspirational future kind of statement. They're meant to unite the people. For a company, they're meant to unite everybody under a banner and a singular vision of the future that they are working to create. When it's for an individual, it's far more personal, obviously, and you can see the value alignment of, for someone like Oprah, you can imagine of that list of values, the things that she might have chosen for herself that might have then made perfect sense in connection with that vision statement. So fairness, equality, like all of these different things that she might have picked out from the list that would drive her to create a vision statement that said that. So if we think about the King's vision versus the mission, as we were saying before, so if their vision is to make the world a better place, then their mission statement, how are they working to create that future? They do it in three ways. They do it through research, they do it through education and knowledge exchange. And suddenly you can kind of see they want to create this in the future. Obviously their vision statement is incredibly vague, just better, but it's okay. It's an emotional, it's emotional in the way that it's like, it's always, what's the word I'm looking for? Evolving. Like it's always going to be there. They're always going to be seeking progression because it's always just going to be better. What's better than what we've done? What's better than what we've done? There is definitely thought that's gone into that. They've not just gone, just better, there's a purpose and a meaning behind the words that they've chosen. And then suddenly when you put that in context of what we know the university to do, it makes sense. Research that makes the world a better place, education that makes the world a better place, knowledge exchange that makes the world a better place. It feeds through the strategy at all kind of levels, whether it's happening at every local level on a consistent basis, maybe not. We might not argue that, we might argue differently from that, but we can kind of understand now as a whole strategy and where King's is going, where this language is coming from. So when we think about creating our own vision statements, these kind of starter sentences can help. So my challenge to you is to finish the sentences. I want to live in a world where, and I am helping to create that world by. And these can be things, anything from your big vision impact of the kind of change that you want to create in the world, or it could be, I want to live in a world where I get to be financially free. It could be as simple as that. I'm helping to create that world by getting the highest paid job I possibly can right now. You know, like it doesn't have to be lofty aspirations of massive world impact, or it can be if that's what's driving you and is in line with your values. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it. And then if anyone's brave enough and happy enough to either pop their sentences in the chat or raise your hand to share them, I would love to hear what you come up with. Valentina, I want to live in a world where there's social justice. I am helping to create that world by educating myself and then find the right course of action. Great.
I don't think I can write twice, but I can read what I wrote.
Yeah, go for it, Julia. Yeah.
I want to live in a world similar, where inequalities are less or lower than now. And I am helping to create that world by raising awareness and offering alternatives to undermine inequalities based on understanding.
Excellent. Interesting. Anybody else fancy sharing theirs? You don't have to, no pressure.
I was almost a bit surprised by my own
okay.
my own answer, because I'm so used to having that kind of external motivation, and that's like what I identify as having, the sort of, oh, I want to promote women in the world type thing. But I find that I've transitioned, perhaps selfishly, to being more and more sort of happiness oriented in my ripe old age of 25. And I was wondering if that actually had something to do with not emotional trauma, but motivational trauma, which I don't know if that's the word, but I think it's quite common among activists to not just get like activist fatigue, but maybe to have experienced a very, very significant setback that actually lessens your motivation towards the cause itself. And yeah, now that I wrote it down and maybe invented the term motivational trauma, I find that, yeah, it's a really kind of clear image of how my motivation is changed, and that I am perhaps more selfish than I used to be. But I have to take that into account, I guess, and just live my life accordingly.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you split those things out into vision and mission, because it's not necessarily that you now don't want to live in a world where that is true. You just have to protect yourself in the role that you play in creating it. So you might still say, I mean, one of the ways that I finish this sentence is, I want to live in a world where women have equal rights and opportunities in society. I help to create that through coaching, through the work that I do in Elevate. But there is a world in which I could be helping to create that world by just focusing on my own career and being the person who's stepping into a role that, in an environment that is male dominated, which I know you guys know a lot about. So it's not necessarily that you have to be the Herculean hero, creating and doing all of this by yourself, and being honest with yourself about how much you're willing and able to personally invest in that is a very mature way of thinking about it. And you might find that your motivational trauma, excellent, you should patent that, trademark it, changes in over time as well. And you might find yourself ramping up again and being willing to step back into the arena. So the thing that I would encourage you to think about in terms of a vision, whereas values you might want to change on a kind of annual basis, I would encourage you to think about your vision as something that would be a little bit more longer term than that. Something, why companies think about their kind of strategic plans in kind of 5-year cycles. It's that kind of overarching longer term aim that wouldn't change as often as you might kind of reflect on values coming in and out. But I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. I've just seen in the chat. No problem, she already gone. So obviously, okay, so hopefully all of these pieces will start to make sense as we go into the last half an hour. I want to concentrate and dig into this of how does this all translate into employability, because we have a better understanding of, hopefully, our own values, what we're personally bringing in, our own personal lens that we're bringing into any role that we take with us, regardless of what opportunity we're currently pursuing. But the way that I wanted to frame this session was not just about how do you use this stuff to get you the job. That is part of it, but it's not all of it. And I want us to take a wider lens view of this from partly what we were talking about before. How do you even make sure that you're applying for the right opportunity in the first place, which we spoke a bit about how you use your values to shortlist the opportunities that you're going to apply for. Then secondly, how you use it to increase your chances of securing that role as part of the competitive process. But then thirdly, how we underuse it to understand and make sure that we're boosting our happiness and fulfillment once we're in the role, because it doesn't finish at the moment that we're offered the job. And we need to take this kind of longer term view, because if we use it as only one piece of the puzzle, that we update our CV, we get the job and we're in, then what happens next time round when we're looking for the next role, or if we arrive and it's not everything that we thought it would be, what happens then? So I want us to kind of keep this more overarching view in our mind of the whole entire process and our career as it spans in all of those cycles, because it's a cycle that we'll go through multiple times. So back to question and answer. This is a question that often throws people, because they're like, is it a trick question? It's not a trick question. What is your LinkedIn profile or CV for? What's the purpose of it, would you say? To sell yourself, yeah. Anything else? Julia, to match myself properly with opportunities. Yep. Create an image of your person. Okay, yep. To network. Yeah. Valentina, mine is about the job I think I can get, not the job I want. Interesting. Some reflection going on in there already. I started after I moved to Canada. Okay. Project reliability. Interesting. Okay. We will come back to this question, but there's a quick video I want to show you. You may well have seen this TED Talk. It's one of my favorite TED Talks of all time. It's by a guy called Simon Sinek, and I think he is a genius. It's a short clip of the whole TED Talk, otherwise we'd be here for the rest of the session. But all will become clear, but I just want to introduce you. I might have to stop share again, because I don't think I've included computer sound. Share sound.
There's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat-screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat-screen TVs. They've been making flat-screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain, looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. You know, sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures and you say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language.
Okay, it was a bit long, but I hope you can see the relevance here. I would thoroughly recommend watching the entire 18-minute talk if it's not something that you haven't seen before. But I think it's an interesting...
What is the name of the video, sorry?
If you Google Simon Sinek, The Golden Circle, you will find it. His surname is spelled S-I-N-E-K. But he's written some amazing books as well. Yeah, would thoroughly recommend him as a person to check out. But it's interesting the way he talks about, you know, in the way of a company, you know, similar to what we were saying in vision statements, understanding for them what their vision and their mission is obviously helps them become a profitable company. What does this mean when we translate it to a human? If we all have our own personal golden circle, and if we understand why we do what we do, how we do what we do, and then what we do, it changes the way that we start to approach something like writing a CV. Because if I was to ask you at the moment, how many of you do you think include something in your CV that would tell somebody about your why or your how? It's usually all what. It's all experience, it's all skills, it's all knowledge, it's all education, it's all the outside circle. And I'm not saying that that stuff is not important. Of course it is. That's how we show somebody our compatibility. But it doesn't show the bit that drives decision making. Light bulb moment, to quote Sarah from earlier. If we are trying to get somebody to make a decision about whether to interview us, we should probably be speaking to the part of the brain that drives their decision making, which is not the what. So by ignoring the two center circles, we're doing ourselves a massive disjustice and probably circumventing our opportunities to get through to interview. So how do we start to correct or think about this? Let me go back to sharing. So when we think about our own personal golden circle, for some reason when I do this, I can't see any of you anymore. There we go. I've got you back. We can start to translate the different pieces that we've put together so far today. We can start to map this onto our golden circle. So our vision statement, why we do what we do, is because we want to create a world in which, you know, our statements of, you know, if we can use me as an example, because we're all here and you kind of understand from my perspective why I do what I do. As I said earlier, I want to live in a world where there are equal opportunities and rights for women in society. That's why I do what I do. Then that is my kind of why statement. Then our how is driven by our personal values and our mission statement. How do I do what I do? I do, you know, my work is driven by, I do things that are like some of my core values, if I can rattle them up, are growth. Funnily enough, I'm a coach who kind of pay, it makes sense. Impact, you know, all of these different things are from my personal values list, but they explain how I do what I do. And then my what, my knowledge, skills, experience, and things to date. So my what is running training sessions with groups of women. It's about, you can start to break down how I might start translating what I do into a CV by thinking about it from the inside out rather than the outside in. So my kind of overarching challenge to you, I guess, is what would need to change about your CV if you were going to start communicating from the inside out rather than the outside in. Let me just check with the time. Okay, we've got 15 minutes. We're going to get there. We're not going to all be able to rewrite our CVs today, but there's some things I want you to think about that you could go away and work on about how you could go about updating your CV to bring in some of the stuff that we've covered today. The first bit is around the personal statement. There is also an equivalent of this on LinkedIn. So the bit that goes right at the top that gives you an opportunity to state what you're about. It is a perfect position for the first thing that somebody reading your CV will see to say why you do what you do or why you want to do that job, right? It's the vision part, and it's perfectly placed. It's the first thing they see driving that decision-making behavior, right? And when you're using one of the worst, people always say, don't fill your personal statement full of buzzwords, because people will list off quite generic language that doesn't feel authentic to the individual and doesn't give you a really good insight into what that particular person is about. And it's because we rattle off statements that are really widely used and aren't personal enough. So if you start thinking about the descriptive language that you might want to bring into a personal statement, your values are a really good place to start. So impact for me is one of my leading personal values. And the first statement that I usually put in a personal statement on a CV, if I'm ever applying for something, is impact driven. It's not, and I can have examples to back it up because it's what drives me. So thinking about how you can turn your values suddenly into verbs that describe you will make your CV feel so much more personal to you and a better representation of who you are and what you can bring to a role, because it comes from a really authentic place. Okay. Next, think about what experience and what examples that you could share on your CV that best demonstrate your personal values. So if you've got a choice, everybody will have a choice of all of the different things that they've done in their career to date, whether that's through studies, and whether you've been a member of society or a group like Women in War and Politics. All of that stuff can count, but it is up to you to choose which are the things that I could give space to on my 2-page CV that best demonstrate why, how, and what I do. And we'll come into that in a little bit more detail, but it's definitely worth thinking about when we've got precious space in a CV or in a cover letter. This also comes true. What are the things that we really want to draw attention to? And then following that is the literal space, in a 2-page CV, when we think about where we position things and what order we put things in. What do we want to draw the reader's attention to? We want to draw a reader's attention to things that are going to help them make a decision. So how are we positioning the things that are most likely to give them an emotional reaction to our CV in a positive way? So that could be, the last iteration of my CV that I did, actually, I moved my education, which had once upon a time when I first got out of uni been pride of place. I moved it to the bottom, because actually things that I had done more recently or roles that I had held were way more significant to the person shortlisting than where I went to university or whether I got a 2-1 or a first. That information had changed and shifted in response to what I wanted the person reading my CV to feel and to know about me. And it became less relevant, and you had to give yourself permission to move things around. There is not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to CV templates. We get to be quite creative in the way that we present that information. So hopefully these have given you some things to think about. And I just wanted to share with you the way that I approach kind of CVs in general. I think it's not a million miles away from what a lot of people say, but it's worked for me very well over the previous years. And I do this in training sessions and with coaching clients when we're doing career coaching and they're on the job hunt. I create a master CV. And what I mean by this is I create a version of my CV which is not space limited. So my master CV is about 8 pages long, and I give myself full permission in that version to write all of my experience in its fullest version, all of my best examples, all of my key achievements, all of the roles I've held, so that I have all of that in one document. That would be this is an incredibly useful exercise. I would thoroughly encourage you all to create a master CV rather than immediately trying to create a 2-page version all the time. It will save you a lot of time in the long run. The second thing I do is keep a success/lessons log. I actually keep it in a couple of places. One of the ways I do this is I have an email file in my Outlook where if something's gone particularly well and I've had a thank you from somebody, or client testimonials, if it's through coaching or those sort of things, I just make sure I save a copy of them. Because I don't know about you, but when I come to writing a CV or writing a cover letter, I get like brain freeze and suddenly I can't remember a single thing that I've done. So having a physical log where I can go back, it helps jog my memory. And when I come to update my master CV, I then translate them into things that live in the master CV document. I pull out the best ones and work out how I want to word them and show what I managed to achieve. But having somewhere easy that you can save like quick wins. And the reason I put lessons log as well in, if there was something that went terribly wrong, save that too, because they're really great stories for interviews. This thing massively went wrong, this time around I would approach it like this, or the second time I did it, I learned and I did it this way instead. That is gold dust in interviews. So make sure you don't just save your successes, but also save the things that didn't go as planned, because they help you really in the kind of storytelling in interviews are really great examples to use. The third one, I'm sure you've heard this before, but it comes off the back of the master CV, is personalize each CV for the opportunity that you are applying for at any given time. Because what you can then do from your master CV is you have all of the information there already. So all you have to do is cherry pick the bits that you think are right for that opportunity. And you can also do this. So I have about 3 versions of a personal statement that I've written that work for different kind of contexts and are I edit them for each opportunity, but it gives me a good 3 to choose from as the base that I then want to edit for the opportunity. But this one I cannot stress enough. Do not have 1 2-page CV that you just use again and again and again for every opportunity that you want. It will never return you the same success rate as allowing yourself to edit and hone a CV for an opportunity. I'm sure you've heard that before. And then the last thing comes back to ensure that you have given enough space to the why and the how, as well as the what. So even if it's just implicit, so some of this can be through, so if impact is important for you, similar to the example that I gave you about me before, so much of my CV is tangible examples of when I moved something from here to here. And I don't even need to probably say that I'm impact driven, because it will show in the examples that I've chosen. It's in the evidence that I've given space to in my CV. So it's about how you designate the space that is available to you to show a more well-rounded picture of you and what drives you and how you approach opportunities and your career, that's not just a list of everything that you've done to date. Okay. We've got 6 minutes left and I wanted to leave time for questions. So this is my poor time management, so I apologize, but we're nearly there, I promise. So I wanted to talk a little bit about interviews. So what happens when you've got the job or got the interview, your CV's done the job and you're in the door, and now you've got to go get through the next stage and win over an interview panel. This is often the first question that you will get asked in an interview. Why did you apply? And hopefully now, when you've got your values and your vision statement, you will have a far better answer to this question than you could have had before, because you will know what stepping stone this opportunity is towards a long-term vision for you, or how it aligns with your personal values. So more than the person who will come in and say, you know, oh, I'm not currently being challenged in my role, or I really like this company, I think what you're doing is really cool, which is, you know, not necessarily bad answers. But the person that comes in and says, what really drives me is creating a world where blah, 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 blah. So with social justice, or whatever the end of your statement is, this job will allow me to play a role in creating that. Not only that, but your company seems like a place where I can grow as an individual, I can have impact, I can do this, which are all things that are really important to me. Suddenly I'm like, bam, this person knows what they're doing and they know why they're doing it. That's a more impressive statement to me as an opening question in an interview than somebody who's just looking for any role that can progress their career. So it allows you to really anchor your responses. Second thing to think about. What do you want them to know when you leave the room? So of those examples where we were thinking, which bits of our experience, our knowledge base, and everything that we have in our master CV, which bits of that do we want to make sure they have heard by the time I leave? Because I think people get very stuck on interview questions that when they're asked them, they have to think of like the most relevant thing in the way that they've specifically worded the question, rather than thinking about it from the other way around, which is, what examples in my kind of Rolodex of experience do I want to make sure I have an excuse to tell them before I leave the room? And you can often twist interview questions to match how you want to tell your experience, than having to feel like I've got to have automatic recall on all of my experience to match the question they've just asked me. If you go in with, say, 3 things that you have done that you do not want to leave the interview room without them having heard from you, you can find ways to shoehorn them into pretty much any question. So what are the things that you have done, or the things that you know, or the things that are true about you that you do not want to leave the interview room until those people have heard it? And then the last one is similar, but not quite the same. How do you want them to feel when you leave the room? Which speaks back to your why and your personal values. There's a great quote, and I can never remember who said it to begin with, but it's about brand. And it said, a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I think it's an interesting way to think about, in an interview context, what do we want them to say about us after we've left? And that often comes back to our vision and value statements. If we have made it really clear that we don't just come with this great package of what, experience, knowledge, skills, we also know why we're doing it and how we're going to go about it. Often that is the first thing that interview panel will talk about when you've left the room, because it's the thing that will drive decision making for them. Hopefully this is all kind of making sense as we kind of connect it all through. So my last thing that I kind of wanted to leave you with is, when it comes to owning your own value and thinking about how do I project myself, I want you to remember that interviews are a two-way street. Just as much as they are interviewing you, you are interviewing them, especially now that you have a foundation of knowing your personal values and the things that you want to achieve over the longer term. They have to prove that they are the right fit for you just as much as the other way around. And I think we forget that, because applying for jobs can be a competitive process, that actually we allow them to dictate all of the terms when actually we have a say in whether we think it's the right atmosphere for us to be in. And there's a couple of things to think about as you go into interviews, but also just the whole job seeking process in general. When you think about your personal values, what questions could you ask in an interview setting that would test whether this would be a positive environment for you? So when it comes to that part of the interview where they're like, have you got any questions for us? Suddenly you can ask interesting questions like, how your, in my research, it says on your website that your company values are X, Y, and Z. Do you see those values represented in your day-to-day work? Bam. I've never, like, that's a good question. Do the people working in the organization feel that the company values are represented day to day? It might be for you, if growth or challenge, like we were talking about before, are really important values for you, you can say growth, like opportunities for personal development and challenge are really important to me. What opportunities will I have here for progression, for training, for X, Y, Z? So you can start to use your values as an opportunity to guide the questions that you ask in an interview that will give you not only an edge in terms of asking interesting questions that they probably haven't heard from anybody else, but also really valuable information for you about whether you actually want to be in that environment or not. It's also an opportunity at the end to, as I say, make sure you've been able to say everything that you think they need to know. I've sat on a lot of interview panels in my time, and I've had it happen a couple of times, and I never have an issue with it. Somebody saying, oh, by the way, I just, of the questions that you asked, I didn't have an opportunity to tell you about my experience in X. I think it was really relevant to this role. So I just wanted to say, I've also done X, Y, Z, if that's useful in your decision making. It's not, they've given you an opportunity to speak. You can be cheeky with it. It doesn't have to be a question that comes out of your mouth for every sentence. You can kind of fill in the blanks where you've not had that opportunity. And I would say definitely encourage you to be brave in doing that. And my kind of last point on that is people often, and this comes back to the point somebody made earlier around thinking that they're not qualified, and kind of that, the opting out of even putting yourself forward for something before somebody's had an opportunity to reject you. There is a whole lot to unpack there, but the thing that is actually something that my dad used to say to me when I first started applying for jobs, and I have kept with me the whole time, is you do not have a decision to make until they have offered you the job. And we often count ourselves out of opportunities before the offer's even on the table. So what's the harm in going through an application process, even if we don't get the job? We're going to learn something. If, it comes back to another one of my favorite quotes, if I don't fail, I learn. It's a win-win situation. If I don't succeed, I learn, sorry. So I either win or I learn something. It's a win-win. So if we go in with that mentality, and actually the only point that we have to make a decision about whether we want to take the job or not is when we're offered the job. So, and when we're offered the job, we can still say no. If through that process, we have discovered that actually it's not going to be an optimal position for us to work in. So I would just, my kind of lasting words for you is, the last question to ask yourself is, why do they deserve you? So rather than the classic view of looking at this of how do I get them to offer me the job, is why should you work for them? Why should they get to hire you? And flip it the other way around for once, because we often don't ask ourselves that question enough. Okay, I've spoken at you for far too long, so I'm going to stop there, and I've run over time, so I apologize for that. I'm happy to stick around for a couple of minutes to ask questions if people don't have to run away, but feel free to head off. Otherwise, we can go to some questions.
I noticed that in my life, but it's probably my history, when I say no to a job, I feel so guilty. Like the other day, I was called to keep in the process for a job, and I asked if I can do remote, and they say no. And I knew I was going to say no, and I said no. And I felt guilty for 2 days. Then my husband told me, but what's your problem? You cannot take it because of the COVID. And we're fine, we don't need it. So, and I was still feeling guilty.
What was the thought process there for you? What was the guilt being driven by?
That's the thing. I am Peruvian, and when I grew up as a professional, right, there was scarcely jobs, and I also left my family home because I was always a rebel. So you never say no to it. You see, that's written in my head. You never say no to a job, but I think I need to unlearn that. Yes.
Interesting. Because
So
I think
this
it's a
session
difference in the kind of guilt thing from feeling guilty because you think it's going to have a negative impact for them. I feel bad that I can't do the job, versus I feel guilty because for me, I've been taught that that is not the done thing, and it means something about me if I turn down a job. Does it mean I'm ungrateful? Does it mean that I'm lazy? Is there something going on there that's like triggering to your personal identity or your personal values? If you've got something that's, you know, hard work and excellence and all those kinds of drivers in your personal values, or they were coming up for you as things that you resonated with, then you can come back to there's a conflict going on with personal values that you can kind of understand where the guilt is coming from, if that makes sense. But you have to allow the positive influences of the drivers to push you towards the right opportunities, rather than letting the negative ones pull you towards the places where you don't belong.
I'm just thinking that I need to learn that I can say no because I have power. And like you said, don't give them all the power. Right? Thank you.
Awesome. No problem. Valentina, it was lovely to see you. We didn't record the last session because imposter syndrome, it was a conscious decision. We don't record imposter syndrome sessions because the subject matter can be really personal. So we don't, we make sure those sessions stay confidential. But I am going to be recording a version of it that is just me talking, that doesn't have the interaction, so that I can share a version. And when I have that, I will share it with Sarah, who can pass it on to you. It's coming.
That'd be great. Lots of people have asked for it, actually. It was a really good session.
Okay, wicked. It's coming in the next couple of weeks. I will send it your way once it's done, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Kristen?
Yeah, just to kind of come full circle on the annoying interface that I touched upon in the beginning, because I had a job interview on Friday, and on Monday I learned that I didn't get the job, and my initial reaction was just relief, because I didn't really want the job anyway. And even though I thought I sold myself in quite well in the interview, I was just, at the end of the day, it wasn't a job that I really wanted. And even though I had the experience to be a relevant candidate, it's not what I wanted to do. But I feel like because the current job market is so scraped, you just really have to go for whatever there is, you know, because I mean, I completed my MA at King's last year, and I do have my little niche of specialization, but there aren't really that many jobs that covered that niche. And I've had this conversation with my partner, who has always been very career driven. He always knew what he wanted to do, you know, ever since he came out of the womb. Every single step that he's taken has been to, you know, drive him towards this end point.
Don't those people make you sick? So they come out being like, I'm going to be a doctor, and then they're a doctor, and that's that.
Exactly. Yeah. And he's very much encouraging me, you know, only apply for the jobs that, you know, you want, that you really, really, really want to do. Like, don't waste your time kind of filling your CV with noise that's just a job. But at the same time, I mean, money. I mean, you do need something. So I was just, yeah, this was like a rhetorically long question. But I guess, do you have sort of any advice / words of encouragement on kind of like the golden ratio in between, you know, being employed in a world where you need to eat whilst also doing something that you really want? Because I think I know that I'm not the only new graduate currently in the seminar who feels like there's nothing for us currently. And like, do we just say, okay, I'll do anything, or do we wait? Do we stand by?
To be annoying, I don't think there's a golden formula of any sort, because that decision will be wholly personal, based on everything from your personal finances, which obviously would not comment on, through to how long you're willing to play the waiting game. And nobody else can answer those things for you. What I would say is, again, if you take the longer term view towards the vision part of what we've been talking about, then it's also one of those things that this stuff is never a linear road. Like, I hate the term career ladder. It just doesn't exist. If you've read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, she talks about it as a career jungle gym. And it's so true that sometimes you have to go up, to go down, to go round, to go back, to go out, and then up and down and round again before you get somewhere that feels like progress. If you're in a position where, if you're at the point at which you feel like, you know what, I just need some income, then start thinking about, okay, what of the things that I've been looking at as criteria that I kind of wanted from a job am I willing to sacrifice for now? What are the things that are non-negotiable? I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. If it's literally just about getting money in, then the other things that I would encourage you to think about are, what can you do in spare time to make sure that you are continuing to get relevant experience? So volunteering, who can you start including in your network? I'm a massive advocate of LinkedIn stalking. I would encourage you, there's a route to go around it just really quickly that I would encourage you to do. Think about the companies that you would quite like to work for, because then you can search LinkedIn for the company name. Then in the company, it will show you all of their current employees. You can search the list of current employees by their job title, go, oh, that sounds like an interesting job title. I wonder what they do. Click on their profile. You will not only see usually a description of what that job entails, but the entire career trajectory of the person that's currently in that role. So you can see what experience they've had to get into that position. And you can do some great kind of landscape searching of, how did these people find out and get into those roles? You can then usually contact them through LinkedIn and go, you sound amazing. Can I please have 10 minutes of your time to talk about your experience? I love the sound of what you're doing and would just really value some advice. And 99% of the time, the person will say yes, because people like an ego boost and they like being helpful. It's really, really rare that somebody won't respond to you on LinkedIn in that kind of way, when you're just saying, I just want to find out more about what you're doing. And usually the other part of that is, vast, like 90% of jobs are not advertised. So if you're thinking about being strategic in your job search, building your network around the niche that you want to go into is one of the best ways to guarantee yourself future employment, because those people that are already in the industry that you want to join will remember your name, will go, oh, did you read? Oh, they will ping you back on LinkedIn 6 months later and say, oh, we've just had a role come up and I thought of you. And you'll jump to the front of the queue. But it's about investing in your network early on before you even really need the job. I do this quite regularly. I'm just connect with people that are in industries that I think are doing cool stuff, not because I want to leave King's, not because I want to do anything in particular, but if my circumstances change in future and I do want to find a new opportunity, you can bet I will be tapping all of them up and saying, if you hear of anything, let me know. And it's about that kind of investment and that payoff. So I would think, and you can also ask them for opportunities to get involved in a project on a voluntary basis, et cetera, that will help build up that experience. And quite frankly, if you're doing that for you, you might decide actually working in retail when the shops reopen is fine for now, because I'm going to spend 6 months building my network and doing volunteering that's going to make me the #1 candidate for that type of role. That's a decision that could be the right decision for you. That was a very long-winded answer, but I hope it's useful in some practical things that you can kind of get your teeth into as well. Okay, I think I'm going to call it there. If anyone has any other follow-up questions, feel free to get in touch with me. Sarah has my email address is rachel@shelivestofly.com, and you're more than welcome to get in touch with me. That's absolutely fine. And I'm going to stop recording.
Thank you again for a fantastic session.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel.